The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine sat quietly in her private sitting room, holding a small velvet box in her hands. Inside lay a pair of pearl and diamond earrings that had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. Today was different from any other day she had experienced as the Princess of Wales. Tonight, she would attend her first major U.S. state banquet as the senior royal lady, a role that had previously belonged to the late Queen for over 70 years. Catherine's fingers traced the delicate pearls through the soft velvet. She remembered the first time she had met Queen Elizabeth, years before she became part of the royal family. It was at a small charity event, and she had been terrified of making a mistake. The Queen, however, had been warm and welcoming, asking about her work and showing genuine interest in her thoughts about community service. "Your Majesty," Catherine had said nervously that day, "I hope I can make a difference in whatever role life brings me." The Queen had smiled, her eyes twinkling with wisdom earned over decades of service. "My dear, making a difference isn't about the size of your actions. It's about the sincerity of your heart and the consistency of your efforts." Now, sitting in the quiet of her room, Catherine felt the weight of those words more than ever. Tonight's banquet would honor the visiting American president and First Lady, but for Catherine, it represented something much deeper. It was her first opportunity to truly step into the role that the Queen had modeled for her throughout their relationship. The dress hanging in her wardrobe had been chosen weeks ago after careful consideration. It was an elegant navy blue gown by one of her favorite British designers, but the real significance lay not in the dress itself, but in the accessories that would complete the ensemble. Each piece had been selected to honor Queen Elizabeth's memory while establishing Catherine's own identity as the new senior royal lady. As Catherine prepared for the day ahead, her mind wandered to the conversations she had shared with the Queen about the importance of state occasions. "These events," the Queen had explained during one of their private tea sessions, "are not just about protocol and diplomacy. They are about representing the very best of our nation and our people. Every detail matters because it reflects our respect for our guests and our pride in our country." Catherine had listened intently, understanding that she was receiving an education that no university could provide. The Queen's guidance went beyond choosing the right outfit or following proper protocol. It was about understanding the deeper meaning behind every gesture, every choice, and every moment of public service. The jewelry selection process had been particularly meaningful. Catherine had spent hours with a royal jewelry curator, learning about the history and significance of each piece. The pearl and diamond earrings she now held had been gifted to Queen Elizabeth on her wedding day, and she had worn them to countless state occasions throughout her reign. They represented not just royal tradition, but the Queen's dedication to duty and service. "These earrings," the curator had explained, "were among Her Majesty's most treasured pieces. She believed that pearls represented wisdom and strength, qualities she felt were essential for royal service." Catherine had been moved by this revelation. She had always admired the Queen's strength and wisdom, but knowing that these small, beautiful earrings had been part of so many historic moments made them feel incredibly precious. The tiara she would wear tonight had its own special history. The lotus flower tiara had been a favorite of Queen Elizabeth's mother, and the Queen herself had worn it frequently in her younger years. It was more delicate than some of the grander royal tiaras, but its elegance and history made it perfect for Catherine's vision of honoring the past while looking toward the future. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself thinking about the American guests who would be arriving that evening. The relationship between Britain and America had always been special, something the Queen had cherished throughout her reign. She had hosted numerous American presidents and their families, always ensuring that they felt welcomed and honored. Catherine remembered the stories the Queen had shared about these visits. "Americans," she had said with genuine fondness, "bring such energy and optimism to these occasions. Their enthusiasm for life and democracy always reminds me why these relationships matter so much. The princess felt a responsibility to continue that tradition of warm hospitality while maintaining the dignity and grace that characterized royal entertaining. She had spent considerable time reviewing the evening's program, ensuring that every detail reflected both British tradition and American appreciation. The guest list for the evening included business leaders, cultural figures, and philanthropists from both countries. Catherine had personally reviewed each name, understanding that these relationships would be crucial for future diplomatic and cultural exchanges. This wasn't just about one evening of elegant dining. It was about building bridges that would benefit both nations for years to come. Her lady-in-waiting arrived mid-morning to help with the final preparations. "Your Royal Highness," she said with a warm smile, "the staff at Buckingham Palace have been working since dawn to ensure everything is perfect for tonight." Catherine nodded, feeling both excited and nervous about the evening ahead. "I want everything to honor the Queen's memory while celebrating this important friendship between our countries." The conversation turned to the practical aspects of the evening. Catherine would need to personally greet each guest, engage in meaningful conversations throughout the dinner, and ensure that the American visitors felt truly welcomed. It was a delicate balance of personal warmth and royal protocol. The Queen always said that the secret to successful state entertaining was to remember that behind every title and position is simply another person who deserves respect and kindness, Catherine reflected. This philosophy had guided Catherine throughout her royal journey. Whether she was meeting with world leaders or visiting local community centers, she approached each interaction with genuine interest and respect for the individual. As the afternoon approached, Catherine began to feel the anticipation building throughout the palace. The kitchen staff had been preparing the elaborate dinner menu for days, ensuring that it would showcase the best of British cuisine while accommodating their American guest preferences. The florists had created stunning arrangements that would complement the formal dining room's historic grandeur. Catherine took a moment to call her children's nanny to check on Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Even on such an important day, her role as a mother remained her top priority. "They're all doing wonderfully," the nanny reported. "Prince George asked if he could stay up to see you in your tiara, and Princess Charlotte wants to know if you'll save her a piece of the special cake." Catherine smiled, feeling grounded by these reminders of her life beyond royal duties. The Queen had often spoken about the importance of family and how being a devoted mother and wife actually made her a better sovereign. "Please tell them that I'll come say good night before I leave for the banquet. And yes, there will definitely be cakes saved for Charlotte." The afternoon was spent in final fittings and preparation. Catherine's hairstylist arrived to create an elegant updo that would showcase both the tiara and the earrings. Her makeup artist worked to achieve a look that was both sophisticated and approachable, understanding that photographs from this evening would be seen around the world. As Catherine looked at herself in the mirror during these preparations, she thought about the millions of people who would see images of this evening. For many, she would represent not just the British royal family, but British values and character. It was a responsibility she took seriously, but also one that inspired her to be the best version of herself. The dress fitting was the final step in the transformation. As the navy blue gown was carefully arranged, Catherine felt herself stepping into her role as the senior royal lady. The dress was elegant without being ostentatious, sophisticated without being intimidating. It struck exactly the right tone for an evening that needed to balance formality with warmth. Her private secretary arrived with the final briefing materials, including conversation topics that might interest their American guests and updates on current issues that could arise during dinner conversation. Catherine reviewed each item carefully, understanding that successful diplomacy often happened during these informal moments between official proceedings. The American delegation is particularly interested in our environmental initiatives and youth programs, her secretary noted. They're hoping to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Catherine nodded enthusiastically. These were areas where she had developed considerable expertise, and She looked forward to exploring how the two countries might work together on these important issues. As evening approached, Catherine felt a mixture of excitement and responsibility. Tonight would mark a new chapter in her royal journey, one where she would truly step into the role that Queen Elizabeth had prepared her for throughout their relationship. Standing by her window, looking out at the London skyline beginning to twinkle with evening lights, Catherine felt the Queen's presence with her. She could almost hear her gentle voice offering encouragement and reminding her that service to others was the greatest privilege of royal life. Tonight, Catherine whispered to herself, "I will honor your memory by serving with the same grace and dedication that you showed me every day." The evening ahead would be challenging, meaningful, and historic. But Catherine felt ready, knowing that she carried with her not just the Queen's jewelry, but her wisdom, values, and unwavering commitment to duty and service. The journey from Kensington Palace to Buckingham Palace felt different tonight. As Catherine sat in the official car beside Prince William, she noticed how the London streets seemed to sparkle with extra energy. Word had spread about the state banquet, and small crowds had gathered along the route, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal couple as they made their way to one of the most important diplomatic events of the year. Catherine's hand rested gently on the pearl earrings, feeling their familiar weight. She had worn them several times before, but tonight they felt especially significant. These weren't just beautiful accessories. They were a connection to decades of royal history and diplomatic service. "You look absolutely radiant," William said softly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "The Queen would be so proud to see you tonight." The comment brought tears to Catherine's eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sadness. Over the years, she had learned that honoring someone's memory didn't require dwelling on loss, but rather celebrating the values and lessons they had shared. "I keep hearing her voice," Catherine replied, reminding me that every person we meet tonight is important, not because of their title or position, but because of their humanity. William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Both of them had been shaped by Queen Elizabeth's approach to leadership, which emphasized genuine care for others above all else. As they arrived at Buckingham Palace, Catherine was struck by the magnificent preparation that had transformed the already impressive building into something truly magical. The palace staff had worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail reflected the importance of the U.S. U.K. relationship while maintaining the elegant standards that characterized royal entertaining. The grand entrance hall had been decorated with a careful blend of British and American flowers, creating arrangements that honored both nations without favoring either. The lighting had been adjusted to create a warm, welcoming atmosphere that would help their American guests feel comfortable, while highlighting the historic grandeur of the surroundings. Catherine and William made their way to the private reception room, where they would have a few quiet moments before the evening's formal events began. This time was precious, allowing them to center themselves and review the final details of the evening's program. The American delegation arrived safely this afternoon, William's private secretary informed them. The President and First Lady are particularly looking forward to discussing education initiatives and cultural exchange programs. Catherine brightened at this news. Education and cultural understanding were causes very close to her heart, and she had developed several innovative programs that were showing remarkable results across the United Kingdom. "I've been following their work in education reform," Catherine said. "I think there might be wonderful opportunities for our countries to learn from each other's approaches." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of other senior royals who would be participating in the evening's events. Each brought their own expertise and perspective to the diplomatic gathering, but Catherine understood that as the senior royal lady, she would play a crucial role in setting the tone for the entire evening. Her lady-in-waiting arrived with a small mirror, allowing Catherine to check her appearance one final time before the formal proceedings began. The tiara caught the light beautifully, casting delicate sparkles that seemed to dance across her face. But more importantly, Catherine felt confident and prepared for the responsibilities ahead. "Your Royal Highness," her lady-in-waiting said with obvious admiration. "You look absolutely perfect. The queen would have loved seeing you wear her jewelry with such grace." Catherine smiled, feeling a deep connection to the woman who had guided her transformation from a university student to a senior member of the royal family. Every lesson the queen had taught her about diplomacy, service, and leadership would be put to use tonight. The sound of arriving vehicles in the palace courtyard signaled that the American delegation was approaching. Catherine felt a familiar flutter of excitement that always accompanied these important diplomatic occasions. She had learned to channel this nervous energy into focused attention and warm engagement with their guests. "Ready?" William asked, offering his arm as they prepared to make their way to the Grand Hall, where they would officially greet their American visitors. "More than ready," Catherine replied, feeling the strength and wisdom that came from years of preparation and the spiritual presence of Queen Elizabeth guiding her steps. The walk through the palace corridors to the reception area gave Catherine a moment to appreciate the incredible history surrounding them. These halls had witnessed centuries of diplomatic meetings, royal celebrations, and moments that had shaped world history. Tonight, she would add her own chapter to that remarkable story. The Grand Hall had been transformed into a space that perfectly balanced formality with warmth. The lighting created an intimate atmosphere despite the room's impressive size, and the carefully chosen decorations reflected both British tradition and American dynamism. As they approached the receiving area, Catherine could hear the gentle murmur of conversation from the palace staff, making final preparations. Every detail had been considered, from the temperature of the room to the placement of the flowers, ensuring that their American guests would feel honored and welcomed. The first glimpse of the American delegation approaching through the palace entrance filled Catherine with genuine excitement. These weren't just political figures. They were people who had dedicated their lives to public service, and she looked forward to learning about their experiences and perspectives. The formal introduction process began with the traditional protocols that had governed royal entertaining for generations. But Catherine had learned from Queen Elizabeth that the real magic of these occasions happened not during the formal moments, but in the personal connections that developed throughout the evening. As she was introduced to the President and First Lady, Catherine felt an immediate sense of connection. Their warmth and genuine interest in British culture reminded her why these diplomatic relationships were so important for both countries. "Your Royal Highness," the First Lady said with obvious sincerity, "we've been following your work with early childhood development with great interest. The programs you've developed could have wonderful applications in our own communities." Catherine was delighted by this opening conversation. "Thank you so much. I would love to hear about your initiatives as well. I believe we have so much to learn from each other's approaches to supporting families and children." The conversation flowed naturally, touching on shared challenges and potential solutions. Catherine found herself genuinely engaged with their perspectives and excited about the possibility of future collaboration. As other members of the American delegation were introduced, Catherine made an effort to connect with each person individually. She had learned from Queen Elizabeth that these personal moments were often more valuable than formal speeches or official documents. One conversation particularly moved her. A young American cultural attaché mentioned that she had studied British literature at university and had written her thesis on the role of women in British society throughout the centuries. "The evolution from Queen Victoria through Queen Elizabeth II to yourself," the young woman said, "represents such an inspiring progression of female leadership and influence." Catherine was touched by this perspective. Each generation builds on the work of those who came before. I'm simply trying to honor the foundation that Queen Elizabeth created while addressing the challenges of our current time. The pre-dinner reception continued with a series of meaningful conversations that covered everything from environmental initiatives to technological innovation. Catherine found herself energized by the intellectual exchange and the obvious goodwill between the British and American participants. As they moved toward the state dining room for the formal dinner, Catherine took a moment to appreciate the incredible preparation that had gone into creating this evening. The dining room had been set with the finest china, crystal, and silver, creating a table that was both magnificent and welcoming. The seating arrangements had been carefully planned to facilitate meaningful conversations throughout the meal. Catherine would be positioned to engage with several key American guests while ensuring that the conversation flowed naturally around the entire table. The menu had been designed to showcase the best of British cuisine while incorporating elements that would appeal to American tastes. Each course had been selected not just for its culinary excellence, but for its ability to represent British culture and hospitality. As the guests took their seats, Catherine felt a profound sense of responsibility and privilege. This dinner table would host conversations that could influence policy, cultural exchange, and international cooperation for years to come. The first course was served with the precision and elegance that characterized royal entertaining. But Catherine's focus wasn't on the food or the formal aspects of the meal. Her attention was devoted to ensuring that every guest felt valued and engaged in the evening's conversations. Throughout the dinner, Catherine found herself drawing on lessons that Queen Elizabeth had taught her about the art of diplomatic conversation. The key was to be genuinely interested in others while sharing insights that could benefit both parties. One particularly meaningful exchange occurred with a prominent American philanthropist who was working on education initiatives in underserved communities. Catherine shared details about her own work in early childhood development, and they discovered remarkable similarities in their approaches and goals. "I would love to arrange for some of our educators to visit your programs," the philanthropist said enthusiastically. "And perhaps some of your team could come to America to see what we're developing as well." Catherine was thrilled by the possibility. That would be wonderful. Real learning happens when we can observe and adapt each other's most successful innovations. As the evening progressed, Catherine felt increasingly confident in her role as diplomatic hostess. The conversations were substantive and promising, and the atmosphere was both dignified and genuinely warm. The formal toast at the end of the dinner provided an opportunity to articulate the deeper meaning of the evening. Catherine listened carefully to the president's remarks about the enduring friendship between their nations and felt inspired to respond with equal sincerity and vision. When her turn came to offer a toast, Catherine stood with quiet confidence, feeling the weight of Queen Elizabeth's legacy and the hope of future collaboration guiding her words. Standing before the distinguished gathering in the state dining room, Catherine felt the weight of history and the promise of the future converging in this single moment. The gentle sparkle of Queen Elizabeth's pearl earrings caught the candlelight as she raised her glass, and for just an instant, she could almost feel the late Queen's encouraging presence beside her. "Your Excellency, Madam First Lady, distinguished guests," Catherine began, her voice carrying clearly through the elegant room. "Tonight we gather not just as representatives of our respective nations, but as people united by shared values and common hopes for the future." The words flowed naturally, drawing from her heart rather than from prepared remarks. Catherine had learned from Queen Elizabeth that the most powerful diplomatic moments came from genuine emotion and authentic connection rather than formal protocol. The relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States has been shaped by countless moments of cooperation, understanding, and mutual support. But it has been sustained by something deeper than politics or economics. It has been sustained by the recognition that our people share a commitment to democracy, human dignity, and the belief that together we can address the challenges facing our world. As she spoke, Catherine's eyes moved around the table, making personal connection with each guest. She could see in their faces the same hope and determination that had motivated her own journey into public service. Queen Elizabeth II dedicated her life to nurturing these relationships, understanding that true diplomacy happens not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of human connection. Tonight, as we wear her jewelry and sit in her palace, We honor that legacy by committing ourselves to continue building bridges of understanding and cooperation. The response was immediate and heartfelt. Catherine could see that her words had resonated with their American guests, creating exactly the kind of personal connection that would make future collaboration possible. After the formal dinner concluded, the evening continued with a reception in the music room, where a small ensemble performed a carefully chosen selection of British and American musical pieces. Catherine moved through the room, engaging in deeper conversations with guests she hadn't had opportunity to speak with during dinner. One conversation particularly captured her attention. A young American social entrepreneur had developed innovative programs for supporting military families, and Catherine was fascinated by the parallels to her own work with British military communities. "The challenges are so similar," the young woman explained. "Military families in both our countries face unique stresses, and they need support systems that understand their specific circumstances." Catherine nodded enthusiastically. "We've been working on programs that provide both practical support and emotional resources. I would love to learn more about your approaches." The conversation that followed was deeply engaging, covering everything from childcare challenges to mental health support to educational continuity for military children who move frequently. Catherine found herself taking mental notes about ideas that could be adapted for British programs. "Would you be interested in participating in an international conference on military family support?" Catherine asked. "I think bringing together practitioners from both our countries could lead to real innovations." The young entrepreneur's face lit up with excitement. "That would be incredible. I know so many people who would benefit from that kind of exchange." As the evening progressed, Catherine found herself energized by conversation after conversation that revealed potential areas for collaboration. The formal diplomatic discussions were important, but these personal connections between practitioners and innovators held the promise of real impact on people's lives. Near the end of the reception, Catherine had an opportunity for a longer conversation with the First Lady, who had been observing the evening's interactions with obvious pleasure. "I have to tell you," the First Lady said, "this has been one of the most meaningful diplomatic events I've attended. Usually these occasions are beautiful, but somewhat formal. Tonight feels different. It feels like we've actually built relationships that will continue long after we return to America." Catherine was deeply moved by this feedback. "That was exactly what we hoped to achieve. Queen Elizabeth taught me that real diplomacy happens when people see each other as human beings rather than just representatives of their governments." The First Lady nodded thoughtfully. "She clearly taught you well. I can see her influence in the way you've brought together policymakers with practitioners, business leaders with social innovators. These are the connections that actually change lives." As the formal reception began to wind down, Catherine and William accompanied their American guests to a private sitting room for a final, more intimate conversation about potential future collaborations. This was where the real work of diplomacy often happened, in quiet spaces where people could speak freely about their hopes and concerns. The president expressed particular interest in the early childhood development programs that Catherine had pioneered. "We're facing significant challenges in this area in America," he explained. "Our research shows that early intervention makes an enormous difference, but we're struggling with implementation on a large scale." Catherine leaned forward with interest. "We've learned so much through trial and error. I think our experiences, both our successes and our mistakes, could be valuable as you develop your own approaches." The conversation that followed was remarkably substantive, covering everything from funding models to training programs to measurement techniques. Catherine found herself drawing on years of experience working directly with families and communities, sharing insights that could only come from hands-on involvement. "What strikes me most," the president said, "is how you've managed to combine rigorous research with genuine compassion. Too often we see programs that are either scientifically sound but impersonal or warm and caring but not effectively designed." Catherine smiled, remembering similar observations from Queen Elizabeth about the importance of balancing head and heart in public service. I think the secret is remembering that behind every statistic is a real family with real struggles and real hopes. When you keep that human element at the center, both the research and the compassion become more meaningful. As the evening drew toward its conclusion, Catherine reflected on how much had been accomplished beyond the formal diplomatic objectives. Relationships had been forged that would enable ongoing collaboration, ideas had been shared that could benefit people in both countries, and a foundation had been laid for future exchanges. The farewell process was warm and genuine, with multiple guests expressing their hope for continued contact and collaboration. Catherine exchanged personal contact information with several individuals, understanding that these relationships would be crucial for turning tonight's conversations into real action. As the American delegation departed, Catherine and William remained in the private sitting room for a few quiet moments to process the evening's events. "That was extraordinary," William said, his admiration for Catherine's performance clearly evident. "You managed to honor the Queen's legacy while establishing your own unique approach to diplomatic hosting." Catherine felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. "I kept thinking about what the Queen would have wanted from this evening, and I realized that she would have wanted exactly what we achieved, genuine human connections that can lead to meaningful collaboration." The palace staff began the careful process of clearing the evening's events, but Catherine took a moment to walk through the dining room one more time. The table settings would be carefully cleaned and stored, the flowers would be distributed to various palace staff, and the formal elements of the evening would be documented for historical records. But the real legacy of the evening would live on in the relationships that had been formed and the projects that would grow from tonight's conversations. Catherine understood that successful diplomacy wasn't measured by the elegance of the evening or the quality of the speeches, but by the long-term impact on people's lives. As she made her way back to her private apartments, Catherine paused to look at herself in one of the palace mirrors. The tiara and earrings sparkled in the soft lighting, but what she saw reflected back was something more significant. A woman who had successfully stepped into one of the most important roles in modern diplomacy, while remaining true to her own values and vision. The Queen's jewelry had carried with it not just beauty and tradition, but wisdom and responsibility. Tonight, Catherine felt that she had proven worthy of both the trust that had been placed in her and the legacy she was now responsible for continuing. In her private sitting room, Catherine carefully removed the tiara and earrings, handling each piece with the reverence they deserved. As she placed them back in their protective cases, she whispered a quiet thank you to Queen Elizabeth for the guidance, the preparation, and the confidence that had made tonight's success possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight had proven that Catherine was ready for whatever lay ahead. She had honored the past while building toward the future, and she had done it with grace, wisdom, and genuine care for the people she served. The evening had been about much more than diplomatic protocol or royal tradition. It had been about the power of human connection to bridge differences and create possibilities. And in that, Catherine knew she had achieved something that would have made Queen Elizabeth truly proud. The soft morning light filtered through Catherine's bedroom windows as she sat at her writing desk, still wearing her silk robe from the previous evening. Sleep had been elusive after such an emotionally and professionally significant night, and she found herself drawn to capture her thoughts while the memories were still vivid and fresh in her mind. Before her lay a leather-bound journal that had been a gift from Queen Elizabeth years earlier. Every significant experience deserves reflection, the Queen had told her when presenting the beautiful book. Writing helps us understand not just what happened, but what it means for our future service. Catherine opened to a fresh page and began to write, her fountain pen moving gracefully across the cream-colored paper. She wanted to record not just the events of the previous evening, but the deeper emotions and insights that had emerged from her first major diplomatic hosting role as the senior royal lady. "Last night felt like a bridge," she wrote, "connecting the wisdom and grace of Queen Elizabeth's era with the possibilities and challenges of our current time. Wearing her jewelry wasn't just about honoring her memory. It was about carrying forward her values while finding my own voice in this role. The writing process helped Catherine process the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The formal diplomatic objectives had certainly been met, but the real success lay in the personal connections that had been forged and the collaborative projects that were already beginning to take shape in her mind. Her private phone buzzed softly with a text message from the First Lady, who was preparing to depart London later that morning. "Thank you for such a meaningful evening. I woke up thinking about at least 5 different ways our countries can work together on the issues we discussed. Looking forward to continuing these conversations." Catherine smiled, feeling deeply satisfied that the evening's impact was already extending beyond the palace walls. This was exactly what Queen Elizabeth had taught her to hope for: diplomatic events that created lasting relationships rather than just ceremonial moments. A gentle knock on her door interrupted her writing. "Come in," Catherine called, and her lady-in-waiting entered with a breakfast tray and the morning newspapers. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," she said with a warm smile. "The early reviews of last night's banquet are quite extraordinary. The diplomatic correspondents are calling it a masterclass in modern royal entertaining." Catherine felt pleased, but not surprised by the positive coverage. She had sensed throughout the evening that something special was happening, and she was grateful that others had recognized the significance of what they had accomplished together. More importantly, her lady-in-waiting continued. "The American embassy has already reached out with several follow-up requests. They want to explore formal partnerships on 3 different initiatives that were discussed last night." This news filled Catherine with excitement and anticipation. The real measure of diplomatic success wasn't media coverage or social media reactions. It was the concrete actions that emerged from the relationships and conversations that had been initiated. After breakfast, Catherine made her way to the nursery to spend time with her children before the day's official duties began. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were eager to hear about the previous evening, particularly about the sparkly crown that Charlotte had glimpsed as Catherine had stopped by to say good night before leaving for the banquet. "Did you really have dinner with the President of America?" George asked with wide-eyed curiosity. "I did," Catherine replied, settling into a comfortable chair and pulling Louis on her lap. "And we talked about ways that children in America and children in Britain might be able to help each other learn and grow." Charlotte clapped her hands with delight. "Can we write letters to American children?" Catherine's heart warmed at her daughter's immediate instinct to connect with children from another country. "That's a wonderful idea, Charlotte. Perhaps we can work on a program that helps children from both countries become pen pals." The conversation with her children reminded Catherine of one of Queen Elizabeth's most important lessons. Public service was most meaningful when it directly improved the lives of ordinary people, especially children and families. All the diplomatic elegance in the world meant nothing if it didn't translate into better opportunities and support for real families. After spending time with the children, Catherine met with her private secretary to review the follow-up actions that would be necessary to turn the previous evening's conversations into concrete collaborations. The list was impressive and energizing. The American delegation has proposed a joint working group on early childhood development, her secretary reported. "They're particularly interested in your universal screening programs and your approaches to supporting rural families." Catherine nodded enthusiastically. "Let's arrange for a preliminary meeting within the next month. I want to move quickly while the enthusiasm is still strong." They reviewed several other potential projects, including cultural exchange programs for young people, environmental initiatives that could benefit both countries, and educational partnerships between British and American universities. Each proposal represented an opportunity to improve lives while strengthening the relationship between their nations. There's also been interest from several American foundations in supporting your mental health awareness campaigns, her secretary added. They're impressed by the measurable impact your programs have achieved. Catherine felt particularly pleased by this development. Mental health awareness had been one of her most passionate areas of focus, and the opportunity to share successful approaches with American communities was deeply meaningful to her. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself energized by the possibilities that were emerging from the previous evening's work. But she also felt the weight of responsibility that came with these new opportunities. Each project would require careful attention, dedicated resources, and sustained commitment to succeed. A call from Prince William interrupted her planning session. He was calling from his own office to share his observations about the previous evening and to discuss the next steps in their shared diplomatic responsibilities. "The feedback has been incredible," William reported. "I've heard from 3 different government departments about ways they want to build on last night's conversations. You've created real momentum for substantial collaboration." Catherine felt grateful for William's support and partnership. Royal diplomacy worked best when it was a team effort, with each person contributing their unique strengths and perspectives to the shared mission of service. "What struck me most," Catherine told him, "was how genuine the connections felt. These weren't just polite diplomatic exchanges. People were really listening to each other and finding common ground." William's voice carried obvious pride and affection. "The Queen would have been so proud of how you handled everything. You managed to honor her legacy while establishing your own distinctive approach to royal hosting." After the call, Catherine took a few moments to walk through the palace gardens, needing some fresh air and quiet reflection after the intensity of the past 24 hours. The autumn morning was crisp and beautiful, and the familiar surroundings helped her process everything that had happened. As she walked, Catherine thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a university student with dreams of making a difference in the world, to a young woman falling in love with a prince, to a mother and wife learning to balance personal happiness with public responsibility, and now to a senior royal lady taking on one of the most important diplomatic roles in the modern world. Each stage of the journey had been shaped by Queen Elizabeth's guidance and example. The late Queen had seen potential in Catherine long before Catherine had seen it in herself, and she had patiently and lovingly prepared her for exactly this kind of moment. Standing in the garden where she had walked with Queen Elizabeth so many times over the years, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. The previous evening hadn't just been a successful diplomatic event. It had been a confirmation that she was ready for the responsibilities that lay ahead. Her phone buzzed with another message, this time from one of the young American social entrepreneurs she had met the night before. "Your Royal Highness, I wanted to thank you for such an inspiring evening. I've been awake since dawn working on a proposal for the International Military Families Conference you suggested. When can we discuss next steps?" Catherine smiled, feeling energized by the enthusiasm and commitment that was already emerging from their new international partnerships. This was exactly what public service was meant to accomplish, bringing people together to solve problems and improve lives. As she made her way back toward the palace, Catherine felt ready for whatever challenges and opportunities the future would bring. She had proven to herself and others that she could honor Queen Elizabeth's legacy while bringing her own vision and energy to royal service. The pearl earrings and tiara from the previous evening now rested safely in their cases, but the confidence and purpose they had represented would remain with Catherine forever. She understood now that wearing the Queen's jewelry had been about more than fashion or tradition. It had been about accepting the full responsibility of senior royal leadership. That afternoon, Catherine began planning her next major initiative, a comprehensive program that would bring together the most promising ideas and partnerships that had emerged from the state banquet. It would be ambitious and challenging, but she felt confident that the relationships formed the previous evening would provide the foundation for real success. As the day drew toward evening, Catherine realized that she felt fundamentally different than she had just 24 hours earlier. The state banquet had been a test, and she had not only passed it, but had discovered new depths of capability and purpose within herself. Queen Elizabeth's legacy lived on not just in the jewelry and protocols that have been passed down, but in the values and vision that Catherine now carried forward into a new era of royal service. The future was full of possibilities, and Catherine felt ready to embrace them all with grace, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to the people she served. The evening light began to fade as Catherine sat once again at her writing desk, adding final thoughts to her journal entry about this transformative experience. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she felt profound satisfaction in knowing that she had successfully honored the past while building toward an even brighter future.